The system's not broken, bro. It's working exactly as it was designed. Let me talk to you more plainly. Not softly, not comfortably, truthfully. Because sometimes truth doesn't whisper, it confronts. There's a system in this country that takes children, especially black children, and solely, but deliberately funnels them from classrooms into cages. It's called the school to prison pipeline. You've heard of it. Don't let that polished phrase fool you. It's not a pipeline, it's a conveyor belt. And the question is not whether it exists. The question is, why do we keep feeding it? Understand this. Schools in underfunded communities often look more like detention centers than places of learning. Metal detectors, police officers, zero tolerance policies. You got a 10-year-old who can't sit still, and instead of asking what's wrong with them, we say, what's wrong with them, and then we punish them. Suspensions, exposures, arrest, and once that child touches the system doesn't let go because systems are not emotional. Systems are mathematical. And the math says the earlier we criminalize behavior, the easier it is to control the outcome. So when a child acts out, we don't correct, we label. When we label, we limit. And when we limit, we predict. And when we predict, we produce. And what we produce is prison. Discipline or disposal. Let's get something straight. Discipline is necessary, but discipline without understanding outcomes becomes destruction. You got kids being suspended for things that used to get you sent to the principal's office and a phone call home, talking back, suspending, dress code, violation, suspension, fighting, arrest. And I know what some of y'all are thinking. Well, they need to behave, and we didn't do this during our day. True, but let me ask you something. What environment are they behaving in? You ever tried to grow a flower in concrete and then blame the flower for not blooming? See, we don't ask enough questions about trauma, about broken homes, about absent fathers, about mothers working 2-3 jobs, about neighborhoods flooded with stress. Instead, we respond to pain with punishment. And then we act surprised when that pain turns into anger. That anger turns into violence, and that violence, bro, turns into incarceration. It's not coincidence. That's design. What we hear becomes what we see. Let's talk about something that makes people uncomfortable, because truth has a way of doing that. Let's talk about what our children are listening to, because what goes in the ear doesn't just stay in the ear. It travels to the mind. It shapes their imagination, and eventually it shows up in behavior. Imagine that. Now, I'm not here to demonize music. Music is powerful. Music can heal. Music can uplift, but music can also condition. If a child listens day after day, week after week, year after year to messages about killing, specifically black people, about revenge, about disrespect, about drugs, about death, what do you think becomes normal to them? See, repetition is the mother of belief, and belief drives behavior. So when the soundtrack of your life is violence, don't be surprised when your actions start to dance to that rhythm. And now we got a generation where ops is the norm, where disrespect demands retaliation. Standing on business is mandatory. Death is not tragic, it's trending. And we laugh, we nod, we play it louder, and then we cry when it becomes real. We have normalized death. Let me say something that might sting a little bit. Death has become normal in places where life should be protected. When a young black man dies, we don't just mourn, we almost expect it. That's dangerous. That is psychological conditioning, because once death becomes normal, life loses its mother value. And when life loses its value, violence becomes easy. Now think about a video game Think about the imagery. Think about the constant exposure to simulated killing. Now, I'm not saying a video game turns a child into a killer. Not overnight. But I am saying that I'm saying when you see something enough times, it stops shocking you. And when it stops shocking you, it stops stopping you. Emotional intelligence teaches us to be aware of what we consume, not just food, but information, because what you consume mentally becomes your emotional diet. And if your emotional diet is full of death, destruction, and dysfunction, don't expect to produce peace. Let's touch on the contradictions that nobody wants to talk about, because this is where it gets real. The same voices that promote certain lifestyles don't always live them. You got artists talking about killing, but moving with security. Talking about drugs, but sober in business meetings. Talk about chaos, but raising their kids in gated communities. Ain't that something? They sell us the storm, but they live in the sunshine. They give you the poison, and then they drink the water. And you mean to tell me we're not supposed to question that? That's where critical thinking comes in. Because emotional intelligence says, how does this make me feel? But critical thinking says, why is this being presented to me? Who benefits from this message? Who profits from this image? Who wins when our communities are caught in cycles of violence? Because somebody is always winning. And if it's not you, you need to ask who it is. As parents, we have a responsibility. We're the first line of defense. Let me talk to my parents for a minute, because I'm not here just to point fingers outward. We got to look inward too. Parenting is not about being liked. It's about being responsible. You cannot allow anything and then be surprised when everything happens. If your child is consuming content that glorifies death, disrespect, and destruction, and you say nothing, shit, you're not neutral. You're contributing, because silence is permission. Permission becomes participation. Now, I know it's hard. I know kids push back. I know they say, shit, everybody else doing it. But since what everybody else become your standard. Emotional intelligence teaches us to set boundaries, to regulate, not just our emotions, but our environment. And children borrow those disciplines from their parents until they develop their own. So if we don't guide them, something else will. And trust me, something else is always waiting. The loop that never ends. Let's connect the dots. A child grows up in an environment filled with stress, trauma. That child goes to school that punishes more than it teaches. That child listens to messages that normalize violence. That child acts out. The system responds with discipline instead of understanding. The child enters the juvenile system. And from there, it's a short walk to adult incarceration. That's the loop. That's the pipeline. And until we interrupt it, it will continue to produce the same results over and over and over again. Different faces, but the same outcome. Emotional intelligence is the way out, bro. Here's the good news, because I don't just come with problems. I come with solutions. Emotional intelligence is a weapon, not against people, but against cycles. It teaches self-awareness, understanding what you feel and why you feel it. It teaches self-regulation, controlling your reactions instead of being controlled by them. It teaches empathy, understanding others so you don't dehumanize them. And it teaches decision-making, thinking before acting. Imagine if more young people were taught how to pause before reacting. Imagine if they were taught that anger is an emotion, not a command. Imagine if they understood that every action has a consequence, and that consequence doesn't just affect you, it affects your family, your future, your freedom. Critical thinking. Question everything, shouting. And alongside emotional intelligence, we need critical thinking. I say it again. Because everything that glitters is not gold. You've heard that before. And everything that trends is not truth. Teach young people to question what they hear, to analyze what they see, and to understand that just because something is popular doesn't mean that it is beneficial. Ask, is this helping me or hurting me? Is this building me or breaking me? Is this leading me toward freedom or towards a cage? Because every choice is a direction, and directions determine destinations. Wake up. Take control. The system is real. The pipeline is real. The influence is real, but so is your power. The power to think, the power to choose, the power to guide, the power to change direction. We cannot control everything, but we can control something, and something is enough to start the shift. So let's stop being passive participants in our own destruction. Let's stop consuming these messages that don't serve us. Let's stop ignoring contradictions that are right in front of us, and let's start raising a generation that thinks before it acts, question before it follows, and value life over everything else. Because at the end of the day, the goal is not just to stay out of prison. The goal is to build a life that makes prison unnecessary.